Marine, and welcome back to the Fuzz Academy. The videos you just saw are of my cosplay Vortex, or Tex for short. Those of you who are into Hell of a Boss may recognize him. Tex is the Hellhound bodyguard of Verasika Mayday and the boyfriend of the Queen of Gluttony, Beelzebub herself. I love the show, but I found myself constantly pausing it and looking at the background characters. I could tell the animators had a great time designing them, and Tex really stood out for me. The first time I saw him, I adored his shapes, and I really wanted to bring them to life. Over the course of the next 2 years, I worked on and off on this project, modeling his parts in Nomad Sculpt and Blender, wiring and rewiring his systems to run his moving parts, exploring building methods to create him, and building and rebuilding part after part until I was happy with him. Ultimately, I entered him into the Emerald City Comic Con cosplay contest earlier this year and won the FX category. It was a really amazing experience, and I wanted to break down my whole process here on the channel for others to see how I made him. This video is going to go into a whole build project, so feel free to check out chapters below if there's anything specific you want to learn about. But first, let's break down what he is in his completed state. The head is 3D modeled and printed by me in a few different materials. It makes use of 2 servos as well as a light-up eye. Those, along with servos in the tail, are run by an Arduino in the chest and controlled by a tiny controller by me by my left thumb. The upper body is made of foam, and the clothes and fur were all done by me, including the little red spikes. The lower body was entirely 3D printed in TPU and furred and clothed as well. And Vortex's hands are actually one of the most complicated parts to get looking just right, but I absolutely adore how they complete his look. Overall, it took about 800 hours of work and rework, as well as 1,200 hours of printing the various parts. Now that you know a little bit about what went into making this Hellhound reel, let's break it down into individual parts, starting right here with the head. For Tex, I started out simple with a scan of my own head, just so I could get the scale figured out just right. Then I sculpted over it using references from the show. Once I was happy, I 3D printed parts, and while some things worked first try like the original head sculpt, other things like the ears took multiple versions to get just right. For certain other parts, I used a couple of different methods, like the nose was printed in PLA. I do love Cosplay by Polymaker for its sandability. And then I used a vinyl car wrap to get the nose shine and texture just right. The teeth are resin printed, sanded and smoothed and painted. Once the parts were assembled, I patterned and cut the fur using a duct tape patterning method. For the short pile fur, I pre-shaved using a carpet trimmer and then finished shaving the longer piles on the head itself to get just the right taper between the lengths. I glued the red scar on first and then glued the rest of the fur around it, adding in little details like airbrushing and little lines to add some texture to the shape and lean into the cartooniness of him. The eyes are computer fan mesh screens with the color dye sublimated on the front and black dye sublimated on the back to help with sight. The eyes themselves are just press fit into the heads. I really wanted to add future upgrades. In the V1, I only had the mesh eyes, and the one I entered in the cosplay contest, I added lights to the left eye, which reduces visibility, but definitely adds to the cool factor. The ears and the eyes aren't the only thing with electronics, so let's transition right into talking about the electronics work used on this project. For the first version of the cosplay, I just used an online ordered Me Tail system for the ears and tail. For those of you not familiar with the company, they make products for ears and tails that pair with a phone app, and honestly, they work pretty well. I originally modified the ears to remove the power/control from the head to a hidden part on the body to save space in the head, but I found the app to be a little limited for doing specific things on command, or found problems with it disconnecting often from the app, making it kind of bad for stage use. They also use a little Gen AI on their website in a few places, and I didn't really like that. So I decided to upgrade to something a little bit better for my needs. For V2, I installed new servos in the ears, bypassed the circuitry in the tail to run the servos that existed there, and added lighting to the eyes. This is all powered by an Arduino Uno R3 with a servo shield. After days of wiring and the immense help of my friend TK, without whom I would not have been able to get any of this done, so big shout out to him, we got a system working. This is the photo of the first system. It was a kind of a wired jumbled mess and honestly wasn't very great, but I'm really proud of the fact that we got it working at all. And the ears are simply servos in the head, which can be replaced via a hole in the back with Velcro if I need to. And the tail has a bypass on it, so if I want to use the old Me-Tail system, I can quickly unwire and rewire it using the existing system and my phone's Bluetooth capabilities. The eye is 12 lights with a diffuser, with the outer shell being a vacuum-formed plastic to give it a clean, smooth look. The lights themselves are NeoPixels, which I've used before on previous mask projects, and it's held in place with PLA from a handheld 3D printer pen. These all connect back into the main controllers of the system. The Arduino Uno R3 supplies the brains to the unit, while the servo shield and its power supply giving the power to these servos for an entire day. The Arduino itself runs off a USB supplied power or a 9-volt, and it lasts as long as I need it. I can do a whole day without having to recharge. And last but not least is a control module. The original module is a device wired to the Arduino with some buttons to it that allow control of the ears, eyes, and tail. It sits in my left hand, is operated by my left thumb. While this is the original version, it was a little bit big, and I found it was a little bit clumsy. I had an issue on stage where I accidentally turned off the system while I was on stage, and I no longer could turn it on because I was holding something in my hand at the time. So I knew it needed a bit of an upgrade. So V2 has smaller buttons, a dedicated switch for on and off, and has a gentle taper to it to allow me to access the buttons a little bit easier. It's got 4 different modes, with a passive looking mode, a look left, a look right, and an angry snap mode, all of which affect both ears and the tail. The only other major change I've done is the housing, which unfortunately was the biggest failure on the stage at the time. In practice, it never moved out of the cavity in the chest, but on stage, the biggest flub was it falling out of the chest and being incredibly obvious on stage. Honestly, I was devastated when I realized it happened. It was so clear that I should have done something better with it, but I guess we all learn through our mistakes, don't we? Don't we? Moving on. This new unit, it has all of the parts attached, including quick and easy attachment and detachment methods for getting into and out of the Cosplay. Before, finding wires and making it all work was a bit difficult. This way, everything is right here. I can swap in all the batteries, I can turn it on and off super easily, and it's a much smaller form factor and a little bit better looking than the sandwich container that I used before. So, yay for upgrades! For the bodywork, I was torn between 3D printing the whole project or making it with foam scaled up from 1/6 scale model to create the shapes I wanted. So as an experiment and trying out new methods, I decided, why not both? Let's start with the lower body. For the entire body, I created a full model of Vortex in Nomad Sculpt. This was based on a mixture of multiple scans of myself and some free assets I had to use to fill in the blanks, as the scanning method I was using at the time wasn't exactly perfect. This was the first time I had used TPU on a project before, and it was actually after I made the lower body parts that I made my video on TPU printing based on what I learned. In fact, a lot of the V2 of this project, I redid many of the first TPU prints, so they were cleaner and more stable. You could see that they were sort of deteriorating after time, and I found that a lot of that was just my settings not being right to begin with. The feet are built on a shoe base, and that shoe has a nylon strap attached to the back that goes all the way up the leg to assist with putting it on. The thighs, legs, and butt are all printed with a gyroid infill only, and I found this to work really well, but they were a little bit uncomfortable as right along the edges, the TPU was a little bit pokey, so I added spandex with some hot glue to make it a bit more wearable. The lower legs were then furred with duct tape and patterned. The upper legs were done with draping the jeans material over the legs on the duct tape dummy. This is actually one of the first things I changed in this cosplay from V1 to V2. I found that the material that I got for the jeans originally, which was an inexpensive find at Joann's that I thought looked perfect, but as I used it more, I found it to be a little bit too thin and weak for what I was doing. I had to de-stress it a little bit to create the cuts in it, and those created huge weak points in the jeans material. And since it was very rigid and incredibly lightweight, it just was really easy to rip. And I could hear it ripping as I was putting it on and wearing it at cons, and that just wasn't acceptable. The next version of it I found at a local fabric supplier. It is a match in color pretty darn well, but it has a lot of stretch to it, which means it handles the wear and tear of my daily use of it a lot better, but it's also a lot thicker. So it was just a better material overall, and it needed to happen, but that's another thing I learned from in this one is make sure that your base materials are really good quality and can handle what you're going to be doing to them. especially if you're going to be on stage and having to wear it all day long. For the places on the body where I had to have the fur showing through the jeans, I added fur directly to the TPU and glued it on. I weathered the edges using a knife and just cutting the edges and fraying them a little bit by hand. The furred part of the lower legs are actually attached to a pair of pants that are inside of them. That allowed me to make sure that everything was fitting into the exact right spot, and I could button it, and I could also store things in those pants because they were hidden behind the thigh padding on the suit. The jeans of the cosplay attach directly to the tummy fur, and this goes up underneath the chest piece and is held up by suspenders at the top. This made it a little bit easier to move around as the whole upper body is not really attached to the lower body, allows access to my electronics pack in the chest, and makes it a little bit more comfortable to wear overall. The modifications I did from V1 to V2 also included changing the shoes out because the first set of shoes I used were really uncomfortable, and it made everything much easier to get on and off, having this inner pants to grab onto and also modifying things to be a little bit more comfortable. One of my favorite weird little details is the zipper from the pants is actually the zipper that goes all the way up to the top of the fur. So they share one zipper and it completes the look, helping to make that zipper for the pants itself a little bit more realistic. The only big change I would want to do still at this point of the lower legs is adding a little bit of an attachment point between the jeans and the lower legs. The jeans themselves, because they have a little bit of stretch to it, can ride up the knees a little bit, and sometimes you can see the TPU below that, and that's not really what we want with our cosplay. So that's the last thing I'll probably be changing on this lower part of the legs before I finish them off 100%. Moving on to the upper body. For this part, I printed off a little 1/6 scale me and patterned directly from it. Isn't he cute? I used this little guy to make patterns with tape on the torso and the arms, cut the pieces of tape out onto a piece of printing paper, scanned them, and then projected those directly onto the wall onto craft paper at scale to cut the patterns out from. Once I had the pattern pieces, I cut 1-inch charcoal foam and glued the joints together with barge cement. I left the armpits open and cut some notches in different areas to help facilitate with movement, especially around the elbows and shoulders. I added the fur to the arms, piecing together a few different colors and lengths. I shaved it to the appropriate length, leaving it a little bit longer on the wrist and shorter along the arm itself. Then I added the airbrushing detail of his tattoo on his left arm. The undershirt was made to fit the torso fairly tightly, and the jacket was made of the same denim I used in the jeans, and I used draping techniques for both of them. The shoulder spikes I made in CAD and printed them out with TPU. I also printed a nut inset into the shoulder spikes so they can be added or removed or changed pretty easily. I think they're due for an upgrade. Making it a little bit smoother, shiny, metallic look would be pretty sweet for the character. The only other thing I plan on changing in the future is adding a pouch to the electronics for the chest and maybe a little bit of batting inside underneath the undershirt to help with the sharpness of the muscle. Finally, we get to the hands. This is honestly one of the most difficult parts of the cosplay for me, as I wanted to find a way to mimic the size of his hands, but still have them be functional. I can't imagine Tex without being able to strike the cool pose, so this was a must for me. I started by finding this model online and buying it. I'll link it down below. I printed out a finger to learn how it worked and decided to iterate with it a bunch until I had something that was workable. You can see here the versions I used until I finally hit 1.0. Unfortunately, it took a lot of trial and error just to get looking right. And the first ones were just okay. They didn't work great all the time. They kind of broke at the joints a little bit easier. They were a pain to get on and off, and they kept sliding off my hands. So I constantly had to rework them to get them just right. When I knew I was going to enter the competition, I decided to make a V2. I designed this from the ground up, using only the original pivot point orientations as the guide. I scanned my hand. I built these directly off that shape, which allowed me to get much better fitting pieces, as well as to shrink the design from the original version I had made. In my first one, I used TPU as the end of my fingers, but I found that to be a little bit unnecessary. So the final version is all PETG. The pivot points are also 3D printed as well, and the whole thing gets attached directly onto a glove to help keep it attached to my hands a bit more. The movement of this version was much better, and I feel like they fit the size of the arms of the character much nicer. The claws themselves are 3D printed in resin, black painted, and have a clear UV coat on top to give it a nice shine and a little bit more resilience. I actually did that for the toe claws as well. Overall, it was a big upgrade to the suit. And one last part, I left the left hand's thumb out completely as I decided to use that area for my electronics controller. So instead, I stuffed the thumb with some foam and used an armature wire inside so I could pose it as needed, hide the button out of sight. The last major thing I created in preparation for ECCC was the build book for the process. Now, honestly, I had never done one of these before, and my friend Ver had recommended I do some research into it if I had time. Honestly, I didn't do this research until at the con, and she helped me realize this may be a little bit more important than I thought. So, in a bout of insomnia, the night before the event, I wrote up a book, and honestly, I'm really glad I was pushed to do this. Without her help on this and many other steps, I don't think I would have done as well, and I probably wouldn't even got it finished at all. I'll link my build book to you in the text below. It was a great way for me to talk about difficult things that I've worked on in this process, just like this video. If you're looking at doing a cosplay contest and they accept build books, I highly recommend you make one as well. Talk about what you did. Talk about what took you a while that the judges may not see if you don't point it out. Show your failures and your corrections, and be honest with it all. For the future, I plan on bringing Vortex to other cons and maybe other contests. I'd love to add a fan to the suit, and I'll be wearing a cooling vest inside the cosplay in the future to help make it a little bit more comfortable. As you've seen, I've updated the electronics, and I still plan on adding a little bit more within that, playing around with some other options. I could see this project being one I can return to in free time, adding little updates and such until I'm just super happy, or until the next big project is underway. And don't worry, I've got a really good one lined up for ECCC next year. So that's Tex. He's my Hellhound guy who I learned a lot from. He holds a dear place in my heart. If you want to see more about how I made specific parts on this guy, I'd love to hear you call those out in the comments below so I can make more detailed tutorials. I'd love to help others learn from what I've learned and help bring your dream character to life. If you like this video, I'd love it if you've subscribed or just liked the video down below. I also have a web store with custom printed boards, NFC keychains, badge holders, and more. I have a Patreon and some amazing supporters over there. If you want to see some behind the scenes of current projects and upcoming projects, that's a great place. Huge thanks to all those supporters, and you'll see them at the end of the video. Thank you again so much for hanging out with me, and I'll see you next time here on the Fuzz Academy. Bye!